So as we get closer to this time, which marks the Pisces, so I'm about to just go into some information about the Pisces. So when you look at the Pisces, understand the fish god. And if you study anything of the scriptures in relation to the fish god, you'll notice the Philistines in this priesthood named of Dagon. So when you look at Dagon, or the Pisces, or the fish king, in the beginnings, when you look at a lot of ancient creation stories, they tell a tale of the fish or the squirmer, or what's spawn, right? So we got to understand that during this time of the new year, of the springing, right, we got to understand Moors and mermaids, if you will, and the sperm before is in this premature state, life in this premature state before budding and becoming what we understand as birth, as life, right? So the Pisces, or the sperm, nomos, when we look, if you study Ogun and all of these different creationalisms, if you understand that sperm in its premature state before what we understand as birth, and the sperm, the Y chromosome, the sun, the air. So these traditions, when we look at the Pisces, the sperm, the air, and what takes place during this particular time of this and region of this time. What's up with y'all? When you look at this 90 degrees east, and we see here this region of the Orient, the springing forth, when we get this term, the Pisces, this fish, if we look at one of the first stellars, when we, a lot of times we look at Kush. You look at the Kush, Kish, and this region, all the way from the exterior of Ethiopia all the way into India, into this coastline, which is 120 degrees east, where you find China and some of these regions here. So these regions, when we look at one of the first invasions into this land area, these regions along these tropics were always a melanated region. As I mentioned before, if you go back to Narmer, who was known as the Scorpion King or the Fish King, a lot of different titles for Nimrod, Narmer, or what have you. But you have to understand the fish and the spawning. Even in this region here, of this region, there's something called the Amur River. When you look at the pantheon of tigers and what have you, in the Amur pantheon, the Mer pantheon of these different tigers, then one of the names comes from this river that's in this particular region over here in these lands. So when you look at the Amur, and during this time of the Pisces, as you see here, the new year, and we're talking about sperm being in this premature state before it sprouts or before it becomes our birth. So when we look at this new year time and how the zodiacs and how time and observation, when we look at these 36 deacons, which are a reference to 10 degrees. Now we look at a degree, a dega, right? This is also referred to as deacons, right? So we understand the dagons and the deacons. There's more to it when you break down the Hebrew language. When you look at the ayin, and to twist, the gayin. So when we look at the Dagon and the Dayan and the degrees, and each one of these 10 degrees, which were essential to calculation to developing the first calendars, this region or this particular time as we head into this spring was very essential to the first calendar. So this is why when we look at September all the way from the time of the fall, and certain temples such as here in Chichen Itza, which are lined along these pole centers from 90 degrees east all the way to the south region where Mexico is. This is why in these regions during the equinoxes phenomena takes place, and how the measure of pi and all of these measurements became formulas for understanding light, and phone. We understand photo, and to capture a photo, to capture the formula, the forming of light. You know what I'm saying? So you understand the firmament and the forming of light and the budding bud light. another funny satire, what have you. So when we look at these monuments, this particular monument here, Chichen Itza El Castillo, which is aligned on this pole center, right, of the scepter and the spring equinox. So these two equinoxes that occur have this phenomenon. Now this is based upon, because of this location and this locational area here of the fall, but this is why the measures pi, the circumference of a circle. We understand that the ancient east, where the ancient location is for the east, and why certain calendars, why they try to change the calendar, try to change the directions and get the compasses, right, all off balance, so you will understand where the ancient east is. But if you understand where the Virgo, where the new year, where this takes place, what time this takes place, it helps map out the chronology. It helps understand the times, right? And why certain stellas are attached to certain landmarks. So when we look at the Pisces and the spawning of the fish, the Dagon, and the Dagon, and a lot of the priesthood developing around these star systems, this is how these maps and how these ancient Negus and Degas, deacons, would move and establish someone to be in these different regions, which was also the term for vassals and different provinces, but it was essential for observation. So, these calculations and these times and these maps are good not only to just understand the calculation, but also understanding that in certain areas that are within or above or below the tropics, especially during this time of the winter, right? The sun is in this Tropic of Capricorn. If you look at the Tropic of Capricorn, this is all the way in the southern region. So when we look at the habits of the times of this particular time, like Saturnalia, Lupercalia, which is the present time, and this raw eating of meat, right, and all of this consumption of flesh, you have to understand how location has an effect on someone's culture and the development of culture. See, these regions that where you see towards the center, towards the core of the earth, which is also, when you look at a horite or the hole or the kori, right, for these particular people, cave-dwelling troglodytes, these people dwelt in the core regions of the earth above these different tropics. So their culture was developed as a lunar observation, being that they observed the predatory habits of a lot of the animals in the night. So this is why their cultural habits, not looking to procreate with the woman and eating of flesh without cooking or preserving the food, is because of their observation of the creatures of the night, the predators, the prey. So this is why we see their culture built upon conquering and savagery and dealing so hatredly towards the earth, right? And lack of respect towards the earth. See, our phenom being within these tropics made us have an association with the earth, an observation to develop the different agriculture and the different cultural systems we see paganized and heathenized to this day, right? So when we see this culture of eating this red meat and eating raw meat, you have to understand, if you lived in the region, right? If you lived in these regions, not in the sun, you can't. Not that you can't. I don't want to say you can't, but especially during the winter, understand it's barren. A lot of the actual land that you would have access to in your territory would be frozen. So you don't have access to the sun, because during from the fall to the winter to this particular time of the new year, these regions here in the center of the earth, also known as these lands of the north, the core center here, these lands don't experience the sun in the same trajectory that those beneath the Tropic of Cancer and above the Tropic of Capricorn. This is why the melanated ones usually inhabit these areas underneath the Tropic of Cancer and above the Tropic of Capricorn. As you see, the whole continent of Africa is pretty much in this tropic. It's a tropical region. So this is why in some of these regions you don't find light-skinned people, right? Because the light-skinned people inhabited more of the core of the earth, and they invaded some of the regions along the borderlines of the tropics, right? When you look at Morocco and a lot of these regions around the red regions, you'll see that this is some of the reasons where a lot of the Mongoloids were able to come in to the southern portion, the northern portion of the tropic, and invade these different lands into these areas, and you can see the mixing and what have you. But the areas that are more centered around the equator and the sun, you'll find universally everyone in these regions are usually melanated because of the significance of the correlation with the earth, as well as, birth, where people are birthed, their culture and how they function is all based upon the celestial, right? The heavens and the earth. When we look at the creation story, right? On the second day, you have the firmament of heaven order being designated, and on the third day, you have the order underneath the heavens, the waters and the lands being designated. Then the fourth day, you have the sun, the great lights, forming the orders for days and for years and for months. So these things are essential to understanding the progression of time in these different lands and understanding cultures, and why we see pedophilia, bestiality amongst these different cultures is because they didn't have the same connection with the divine presence of the soul that goes from its different tropics within the tropics to learn the ways and the truth of this divine universal order. Now, over time, as religions have formed, many people have been able to form and come into different religions to take different orders. But when we're talking about a culture, what one's culture is, this is why we cannot integrate with any and everyone, is because their culture and their way of being, which has an effect on your genetics and phenome, right? What you eat and your practices are designated with your connection with the earth. So the more we get detached from our culture and participate in this genetically modified culture of currency, of monetary exchange of value of things that we make value, that's a man-made culture. You know what I'm saying? God has given us everything bearing seed within itself. If we understand the functions and the functionality of the earth, we can provide for all. So, that is where essentially I hope we can get to, is to getting back to the knowledge and the functionality of the earth and making man on earth abide by the laws of the Creator before the earth destroys and cleanses itself in the process. You know what I'm saying? So hope this is informational and helpful for any of you that that studied the creation. If you look at the 36 deacons and the functionality of time, this spring is actually the semi-annual New Year. Some look at the New Year during September, and now this particular time is the semi-annual process. So now during the tropic of this year, when the sun gets to this peak here, now spring, the adverse happens, right? Now during the Tropic of Capricorn, they experience a winter during the summer of the Tropic of Cancer. So the sun's trajectory doesn't really play an effect on those that are within the tropics. The subtropics sometimes get different seasons, and this is essential because when you study ancient phenomena that took place, especially prehistoric phenomena, it's only based upon the observational functions of the earth that allow us to communicate what took place in a lot of these different things. So if we don't understand what the terms mean, it loses us, it keeps us in Babel, confusion. So to really become more of a researcher and really define things, understand why the letter A is formed the way it is, understand why the letter B is the way it is. If you just do in-depth studies, as much as tedious as it is, it reveals a lot of information. And then it allows you to see how the miscommunications of the basic foundations of the universe have been taken advantage and manipulated by different men and orders of men. Peace.